My name is Claire Elizabeth Matthews. I'm 56 years old. I live in a split-level house on a quiet cul-de-sac in Lakewood, a Cleveland suburb, where the winters drag their feet and the summers smell like grilling charcoal and cut grass. I used to be a night nurse at the county hospital. Now I work early shifts at a small urgent care 2 towns over. I garden when my knees let me, and I make sourdough on Sundays the way some people pray. It's the thing that centers me. But for the last decade, the center of my life has been a different kind of work. Staying sober, staying small, staying available to the people I had once broken. I am a woman who built her life back from ruin. Divorce papers, a college fund I clawed out of part-time shifts, a daughter who learned to cook for herself at 12 because I wasn't always there. I am also the woman my daughter texted last month with 3 words that felt like a closing door. "You're uninvited, Mom." Before I begin, if you're into real stories that hit deep, please consider subscribing. Sharing this isn't easy for me, but maybe someone out there needs to hear it. That text arrived on a Tuesday. A gray day the sky could not commit to rain, the kind where you can smell the city through the window even at a block away. Emma, my daughter now 30, had sent it with a little white heart and a string of emojis that tried to soften it. I'd like to tell you there was one good long conversation after that. A knotted, messy scene where we worked it out with tears and trembling hands. There wasn't. There was one voicemail where she said, "This is final, Claire. I can't have you there." There were frantic texts from me. Apologies stitched with old guilt and new resolve. There were rational arguments. "I'm sober, I won't ruin the day, I only want to be there to see you." And there were the less flattering pleas. "Please, please, please." She didn't reply. Her fiancé, Alex, replied once. "We need this to be about us." Then radio silence. You should know the wound that does not hurt the same way twice. The first time it cut into me was different. The young version of me who loved too wildly and left a bruise on the life of a little girl. The second time, years later, it was like walking into a house you used to live in and finding it empty. The spaces rearranged in ways that made you feel both alien and ashamed. Uninvited was not just a word to me. It was a verdict, an echo from decades of choices I had already paid for. Standing in my kitchen, the kettle forgotten on the stove, I felt the old familiar physical language of panic. Throat tight, palms slick, a pressure behind my eyes so hot it threatened to make me cry and then keep me paralyzed. It matters how we got here. It matters because if I tell the whole truth, you will understand why the thing I did next, and why I had to do it, made people gasp. I want to be honest with you, even when honesty is an act that exposes my raw nerve, because honesty is the only currency I have left that might buy me a chance at repair. Emma was not always protected by walls. When she was a child, our house smelled of toasted bread and coffee and the bleach I used to hide the nights I drank too much. There were days I forgot school pickups. There were nights where her pajamas were on the couch and I would find them and think, with a pound of shame, about how I had let the world tilt. I was not cruel. I was inconsistent. I was present and presentless. I left, I stayed. That is the complicated geography of long-term addiction and recovery. It makes you a mosaicked person. Shards of care embedded in a river of broken promises. Emma grew up and learned to be careful with attachment. She learned to build fences where I had left holes. In the years after my divorce from Tom, after rehab, after the hard, ordinary work of rebuilding, I learned to be patient. I spent birthdays alone with a roast chicken and a crossword. I claimed weekends for yard work and sobriety meetings. I kept my hands busy. I learned to listen. The townspeople knew me as the nice nurse who never raised her voice at PTA meetings. They did not know the orchestra of regret I carried like a constant hum. So when I found out, really found out, that Alex, the man Emma was set to marry, held a past that no amount of gilded ribbon could hide, my instinct was not to protect my own ego. It was to protect Emma. I tried to tell her. I wrote an email. Called. I left a message. I offered to meet with Alex. She shut me out. She told me she loved him. She said the past matters when it fits in a neat box and that mine did not. And then she uninvited me. My friends told me to respect boundaries. "Give her space," my sponsor Patricia said softly over tea. "Let her make her choices. You can't fix her life for her." That was the right thing. I agreed to the right thing in words and not in bone. because I had been on the receiving end of being ignored, being dismissed, being told I was too much and not enough in the same breath. I knew how dismissal felt. I also knew something else. There are truths that, if left unspoken, become complicit. When a parent is silent about danger, silence is a choice. The night after the text, I sat at my kitchen table with a manila folder I had not meant to open. It contained, in the way that lived memories contain both tenderness and evidence, screenshots, old police records, a message chain. I told myself I wouldn't read it all. I read it all. My heart pounded like a fist against my ribs. The evidence was not dramatic in a way that novels like. It didn't scream. It whispered. There were bruises in photographs. There were apologetic messages from a woman named Rachel who had dated Alex before Emma. She wrote about control, about promises that turned into demands, about apologizing for things she hadn't done. There was a restraining order that had been filed and dismissed months before. There was a police log that had an entry. Domestic disturbance, victim declined to press charges. These were not tabloid fireworks. They were the slow accumulated sediment of danger. I knew the question everyone asks at this moment. What gives one person the right to stand between another and their choices? The answer is simple and terrible. Love. When a parent chooses to step between a child and potential harm, it is not always a graceful act. It is sometimes a messy, ugly, desperate one. I wanted to be graceful, but where I come from, honesty is rarely tidy. I made a decision that night. I would go to the wedding. I had no invitation, yes. Had no right, yes. I had a folder with the story otherwise left unsaid, and the trembling knowledge that if I allowed Emma to walk down that aisle without a clear picture of the man she was promising her life to, I would have to live with the knowledge that I had failed her again. The thing we don't say often enough is this. Sometimes you sacrifice the thing your heart wants, approval, presence in the front row, to give someone else the chance of a life. That's not noble in a movie way. It's monstrous and brave in the same breath. If this is resonating with you so far, a like really helps us reach more people. And if you've been on either side of this, the parent who acted or the child who felt betrayed, share your truth. I'm reading everything. I packed a small bag that night, took a deep breath, and rehearsed what I would say and how I would say it. I practiced breathing in a quiet, controlled way, like I did in sobriety group when urges came knocking. The next morning I sat across from the mirror and tried on apologies and accusations like dresses. There was no smugness in what I was about to do, no righteousness. There was instead the small, burning hope that being honest could save someone I loved. I told myself over and over that I would accept whatever consequence followed. Being escorted out, bad looks, slander from those who love Alex. I told myself I would take whatever came if it meant Emma left the night with more information than she arrived with. The drive to the venue would be 3 towns and an hour of highway. The sky that day was a washed, bright blue, cruel in its cheerfulness. I felt small and enormous at the same time, like a dog walking through a parade with a flag on its back. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My chest was not. I recited quietly the things I would say. My folder sat on the passenger seat, its edges soft beneath the passenger side headrest. When I started the car, I had the feeling you get right before a fall. That flicker of vertigo where past and future tilt into each other and you are too old to be surprised by what you will do. Driving through the neighborhoods toward Willow Creek, where the wedding would be held, I watched strip malls and manicured lawns slide by like a film strip. The world smelled of summer. Hot asphalt, the tang of someone grilling ribs near a backyard fence, the faint floral sweetness of someone's hydrangeas. I tried to keep my breathing even, but I could feel it in the way my knees clicked against the steering column with each turn, an old mechanical sympathy. The tape of my life, the moments I had replayed and tried to edit, felt newly raw. I remembered Emma's small hands, the way she used to fall asleep mid-sentence at the kitchen table when she was tired, crumbs on her cheek. Those memories are small, bright coins in a pocket that has been largely empty for a long time. I clutched them now as if the coins could buy us both redemption. You need to know who else I had been besides a flawed mother. I had also been a woman who fled an unsafe marriage when Emma was only 4. Tom had been a man with a temper like a storm door. Loud, slamming, then gone. I left with a duffel bag and a handful of coins, but I also left with the terrible, necessary clarity that my daughter needed a different home. The neighbors whispered for a while, they always did, and then mostly they stopped noticing us. I worked nights, slept days, learned to be awake for what mattered. School concerts, scraped knees. I lost track of many things. Friends, miniature versions of myself. I also gained something. The ability to see the scaffolding of other people's lives and to notice the splits that might make a house dangerous. That is part of the job of a nurse. You learn to notice the small changes that predict a collapse. After Emma's father, Tom, left and then later remarried, Emma and I wavered between closeness and distance the way a weather vane wobbles in a breeze. She began to prefer predictability, a curated life with clear boundaries. When Alex came along, he had charm that smelled like fresh paint. Polished, focused, efficient. He had a job in tech and a smile that slid easily into social rooms. He brought flowers and plans and a way of smoothing over inconvenient edges. To Emma, he looked like the answer to a problem she had not known she had. To me, he looked like a man who could be dangerous in ways that didn't set off alarms at first. Doors that locked from the inside, subtle erosion. I did the thing you do when you suspect someone you love is stepping into danger. I started to dig. Not in a peeping horror story way, but like someone checking a house's foundation because a friend asked you to. I contacted an old colleague from the hospital who owed me a favor. I reached out to a woman who had once known Alex in college. The dirt was soft at first. A rumor here, a defensive post there. And then the dirt became something else. A police call from 3 years ago. A terse email from a woman who had wanted to name what had happened to her. A photograph of a bruise behind a laughing social selfie. That is, the evidence did not fit into a neat moral category. It was messy, ambiguous, the kind of thing that could be gaslit into meaninglessness if someone wanted to. But when you pile enough of those small, dark stones together, they make something sharp. There is a particular kind of insomnia that only comes to those who have recovered from a life of substance dependence. You know, the sleep that is not restful, the sleep of someone who measures their nights by avoidance. I had the opposite now. The kind of wakefulness with purpose. I could not be distracted because the thing outside my door was heavy and urgent and required movement. My hands were steady. My heart was full of tremor. I printed out pages. I organized them into folders. I made tabs. I made copies. Regional police reports have an economy of language. They record facts and then stop. What they do not record are the tendernesses that might explain why someone refuses to press charges. What they do not record are the silences people make to survive. I also had reasons of my own to confront that did not include rescuing Emma. There was a secret I have kept from most people. When I was 23, before redemption, before the clean years, I let someone I loved walk away without the tools he needed to stay. His name was Mark. He was a neighbor's son who loved music and left an old amplifier in my basement. He left a note that I read years later. "You taught me to hold my breath when things are about to break." That sentence has haunted me. I had not known he would crash into the sea a year later and never come back. Did I kill him with my absence? I do not know. But guilt is an added lens. When you have been careless and someone else suffers, you hyper-alert yourself to potential harms to anyone in your orbit. That hypervigilance made me a person who could not, in good conscience, hold back. All of this, the evidence, the guilt, the ache to protect, gathered itself into me like a furnace. I rehearsed lines in the mirror, phrasing them not as accusations but as facts. "Emma, I found records. Found messages. These are not judgments. They are things to consider." I thought about the way to deliver truth. As a conversation or as a revelation. I wanted the conversation first. I wanted to be asked to speak. But Emma had closed her door. She had set up a boundary designed to preserve peace. People mistake peace for safety all the time. Peace can be flimsy. Safety is structural. I had been invited by my own conscience to choose which I valued more. On the morning of the wedding, I stopped at a convenience store and bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum. The clerk, a kid with a baseball cap and a face full of freckles, wished me well in the world the way people do when they sense you're carrying a weight. "Good luck," he said. Thanked him and paid. The small ritual of exchange steadied me. I thought about how little of my life these strangers really knew. The ways I had failed. The times I had tried to fix the irreparable. Yet their casual kindness felt like a rope. By the time I pulled into the gravel drive of Willow Creek Country Club, the sky had become a particular blue that makes everything look sharpened, as if life itself had been edited. Cars were strung along the entrance, people moving like small islands of silk and laughter, the air scented with sprayed perfume, fresh-cut grass, the buttery fill of pastry on trays. The valet, a teenage boy with overripe optimism, took my car keys and asked, "Are you here for the Matthews-Rose wedding?" I said nothing. He took my name, the paper he handed me looked official, and then he handed me a little sticker. "Guest." My mouth went dry. I had not expected that small thing to feel like a betrayal and a relief at the same time. Relief because it meant I could step into the room and watch. Betrayal because being a guest, when my invitation had been revoked, felt like another erasure of my agency. I tucked the sticker under the collar of my blouse with fingernails that trembled. Walkways at Willow Creek are lined with hydrangea bushes and lanterns that would be lit come dusk. The sound of an organ spilled from the chapel where the ceremony would be. A simple piece I recognized from high school weddings. I could hear the laughter of women in gowns, the measured chuckle of men pretending not to be nervous. Waiters carried trays in a precise ballet, balancing glasses that reflected the sky. The air felt thick with expectation. It is a peculiar kind of cruelty to be present as when your child is given away in public and you are told not to be there. It's like being asked to watch someone else live a life with your fingerprints on it and no way to claim the mark. A woman from the event staff, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the efficiency of someone who manages crises daily, approached me with a clipboard. "Mrs. Matthews," she said. I told her I was Emma's mother. She smiled in a way that wavered and said, "We were asked to limit seating for family, but there's a small spot in the back reserved for parents if they change their mind." She had meant to be gentle. He nodded. Inside me there was a small, self-sabotaging part that wanted to leave, to honor the boundary, to be the good ex that respects boundaries. But the evidence in my folder throbbed like a thumb under my skin. I thought, you either tell the truth now or you carry the silence like a stone for the rest of your life. If you're following and this is making you feel something raw, please don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear how this ends. I will keep being honest. The truth is long. I sat in the back of the chapel and watched Emma as she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, the light catching the veil just so. The smell of lilies fell over me, and I wanted to reach out and catch her hand and say, "Look at me. Look at these things I found." But instead I sat. Pride is stubborn. Humility is an act. I had promised myself I would be calm, measured, factual. I told myself I would wait until the reception and then speak. The ceremony unspooled like a film I had seen before, vows that were beautiful and the kind of earnestness that in another life I would have envied. I felt old in the temple of youth, like a worn hymn in a modern chorus. During the vows my hands were steady in my lap, though my skin buzzed with the energy of someone about to take the stage. I clutched the manila folder under my coat like a talisman. The organ swelled, the kiss happened, and the crowd flowed out into sunlight. Outside, the world smelled like lemon oil from the croquet lawn and the faint smoke from someone's cigars. The wedding party dashed through candid photographs, the laughter of bridesmaids pealing like chimes. My feet felt heavy. I walked toward the reception tent where the truth would either make a sound or become dust. The reception tent at Willow Creek was enormous. Its canvas stretched taut over white poles, chandelier crystals catching light like little heartbeats. Tables were set in perfect radial symmetry, centerpieces of eucalyptus and white roses reflecting the kind of taste Emma had always tried to cultivate. Minimal, clean, a kind of modern restraint. The sound of background jazz drifted under conversations, the clink of glasses and the buttery melody of polite laughter. Tray after tray of hors d'oeuvres made the rounds. Smoked salmon on rye, tiny goat cheese tarts, prosciutto-wrapped figs. The smell of coffee and pastry rose soft and rich from one corner where a man in a bow tie tended to the dessert table. There were notes of lavender in the air from the floral arrangements and the metallic tang of someone's cologne. The whole environment smelled like an edited life. I sat at the back of the tent on a folding chair, the kind used for backyard weddings, and placed my manila folder on my lap like a sleeping animal. In it, the small proofs of danger looked impotent in the bright social light. Photocopies of police logs, a few screenshots of messages, a photograph with bruised skin half hidden behind smiles. I would have loved for these cards to have the authority of an arrest or a conviction, but real life rarely offers such neat certainties. So I had compiled everything I could. Official records, a letter from Rachel, the woman who had once dated Alex, and notes from a conversation I had recorded, with her permission, where she said, "It wasn't perfect, Claire. I couldn't get him to stop." I had told myself I was not gathering ammunition for a battle. I was gathering information for a conversation. But when you stand in a place like that, with a man you suspect of harm moving through the crowd like a shark in a tuxedo, you realize conversations can be swallowed by noise. People moved in clusters and pairs, their faces lit by the brittle, honest joy of weddings. An officiant laughed at something a man in a rented suit said. A teenage cousin took pictures with a disposable camera, the flash popping like distant fireworks. I could see Emma in the middle distance, laughing at something Alex said. He had his arm casually slung around her shoulder, the kind of private physicality that looked like ownership to someone attuned to boundaries. My throat constricted. The urge to run into that circle and tear it open with my voice pulsed like an alarm. Yet I understood the calculus of public revelation. People shut down when shame is thrown in their faces. Dignity, even for people you fear, is a lever. I wasn't interested in humiliating anyone. I only wanted Emma to have the widest possible picture of the man she was choosing. So I stood up, the manila folder heavy in one hand, and walked toward a woman I knew from town who chaired the community nonprofit. Susan had been at Emma's preschool bake sales. She was reasonable and known for keeping bad things out of the papers. She was also a mutual friend to both sides. "Susan," I said, voice low, "can I find a quiet minute with you?" She smiled, the polite lateral move of someone who loves to be helpful, and guided me to a small alcove outside the tent, where the scent of boxwood was clean and intense. I told Susan, in a voice that tried to tumble the facts without rolling them into accusations, what I had found. She listened with the tilt of someone cataloging a problem that needed solving. We returned to the event together, and she agreed to help me talk to Emma privately. We found her in a sunlit corner, a group of bridesmaids clustered like bright birds around her. She was flushed with happiness. Her laughter cut the air like glass. I asked to speak with her alone. Emma's face changed when she saw me working toward her, that look of someone being ambushed with a childhood shame. She put a hand to her chest, the way people do when they brace to deliver or receive bad news. "Mom," she said, thin with reservation. She did not take me in for a long instant. The world contracted to the space between us. I dismissed Susan gently. She hovered like backup, but remained a discreet distance away. I needed this moment to be only between my daughter and me. "Emma," I began, and somehow the voice that came out was steadier than my heart felt. "I know you told me not to be here. I'm sorry I disobeyed. But I have something you deserve to see before you say vows." I drew the manila folder from beneath my arm and presented it like an offering and a burden. Watching her face as she took the first sheet was like watching a page being turned. The color drained under the flower of her cheekbones. "What is this?" she whispered. I wish I could tell you she read it and then immediately understood in a slow, cinematic way. That would make for better storytelling. The reality is Messier. She read, her lips moving. There were syllables I could not catch. Then her eyes flicked up and fixed on me, a tiny bright flame of incredulity. "How could you, how dare you," she began, the words like thrown knives. "You were always the person who told me to be calm, to trust. You are making this about you." The crowd, intently unaware a private explosion was beginning at the edge of the tent, hummed with conversation. The music took a breath. This was the part where I practiced being reasonable. I had a speech in my head that had been stitched into itself by weeks of rehearsals in sober meetings and in the cold light of mornings. I know I am not some perfect person, I said. I am not the woman to tell you I was always right. But these facts are here. Alex has. And I recited calmly, the papers heavy in my hand. Messages from a past relationship. There was a police call. There are photographs. I want you to see them for what they are and for what they are not. I want you to decide with more than joy, with more than hope. Emma's face moved through a sequence of expressions I knew by heart from her childhood. Hurt, the slow hardening of a shield, anger that took the shape of accusation. You always think you know best, she said. You always assume you need to protect me from my own choices. You left me when I needed you. You don't get to decide for me now. The words were a kind of cold surgical blade. A couple of nearby guests turned. Someone whistled low and shocked. Conversations dipped. I heard the rustle of grapevine gossip beginning to weave itself around us. Emma, please, I said. If I was here to control you, I would have dragged you away years ago. I'm here because I want you to have all the information. I'm here because I love you. Her hands began to tremble. The delicate napkin on the table beside her caught my eye. I thought about the many nights I had tried to make her feel safer in the world, and how sometimes those attempts had been half measures. You don't get it, she said, voice breaking. You don't get to act like this and then walk away and think you fixed something. The air around us thickened. Alex appeared as if from the air, like a character answering a summons. He came up to us slick and composed, the kind of man who could put his palms up and fold blame into a smile. Is there a problem? He asked, too softly for the microphone but loud enough for the ears along the aisle. From somewhere someone gasped. Problem? I said, the word a pinprick of heat. There may be safety concerns you should see. I handed a photocopy to a bridesmaid who looked shocked and a little nauseated. A hush settled like dust. People pulled their phones out. The chorus of clicking was like distant rain. Alex's jaw tightened. He used to be charming. Now there was hardness in him. Claire, he said in a voice that tried to carry tempered authority, you have no right to make accusations at my wedding. His hand found Emma's, a public staking of ground. She did not pull away. It was then that the room split into two kinds of people. Those who wanted the party to continue and those for whom truth, even messy truth, mattered more than a night of celebration. The murmurs rose. A man 2 tables over, a stranger who had had one too many, stood and looked like he might make a fuss. Susan came forward then, the staff fluttered, and the DJ awkwardly lowered the volume. Someone found a microphone. My name is Claire Matthews, I said, and I felt something like a collective intake of breath. It was the kind of silence you get when a room realizes you are saying something they will have to address. I laid out what I had without colorizing it with my own past mistakes. I spoke of the police entry, the messages, Rachel's letter. I said the words in a plain, unadorned voice. For a few moments time became an instrument tuned to the string of whatever might come next. People's faces were shocked. Some because of the content, some because of the audacity of being the mother to stand up in a tent full of linens and tell an uncomfortable truth. Cameras raised, fingers tapped on screens. Emma's sister, Rachel, who shared a name with the woman in the messages but was not the same, burst into the scene, furious and protective. Alex's hand found the microphone like a shield and denied, blamed, minimized, the tactics of someone trained to deflect. Slurs of conversation erupted. She's drunk. She's unstable. Why now? There were whispers about my past spilled like another truth made malicious whole. Old parts of my life, the nights I had been absent, were weaponized. That was predictable and hurtful, but not surprising. A security guard moved forward. Emma stood on the precipice of collapse. The world was a centrifuge of accusation and fear. I felt my throat go dry. I felt the hot, old shame of being dismissed. And yet in that moment, under the tent that smelled of lemon and rose, I knew there would be no easy exit. I had lit a match in a ballroom, and it would either illuminate or burn. The thing I had done had shocked the guests. What I had not realized was that it would also shock myself. I was not sure which was more dangerous, the silence I had been carrying for years or the sound I had finally made. After I spoke, the tent fractured into islands of sound and stillness. Some people rallied to Alex, their voices a low hum of defense. Others clustered around Emma with looks that skittered between pity and fear. The staff moved with the sort of quiet urgency that comes with managing catastrophe. Placating, separating, negotiating. The florist bent down to pick up petals that had been scattered from centerpieces. The DJ muted the music entirely as if radio silence might restore order. A woman I used to see at community meetings, a quiet presence who had always sat in the third row, took me by the elbow and said in a voice I felt was almost a lifeline, "Claire, breathe." But the breath felt like a fragile rope fraying in my hands. The first response I received from Emma was fury, a bright, sharp thing that cut through everything. "You can't do this," she told me, eyes glittering with tears she was trying not to let fall. "You've done this my whole life. You make everything about you. You always have to be the rescuer, or the martyr, or the contrite mother. You left me. You left me to learn what life is. You don't get to play savior." Her words were a kind of truth I did not have a ready answer for. There was history there. Years of me not being enough. Years of me holding my feet over the edge of the cliff and thinking perhaps she would climb back. Her anger was valid. It stung and it was in part earned. I tried to respond with the one thing that is real for any parent who is trying to hold two truths at once. "I know I have made mistakes, Emma. I know I have left you sometimes. I am not saying I am perfect. I am saying there is information here you deserve to know." The reply was a kitchen sink of emotion. "You think you have a monopoly on caution," she said, voice rising. "But the price of your cautions has always been my peace. What if this is just you trying to be in control again?" That cut like glass. It was like someone stepping on a bruise I had never allowed to heal. The truth is, I had spent a lifetime trying to earn the right to be trusted. Sober years did not deliver trust like an automatic deposit in an account. Trust is slow. It is earned by actions over many days. I had been ready to pay back that trust with the currency of truth, but the ledger did not balance instantly. Alex was not subtle in his counter. He called my actions disruptive, manipulative. "She has a beautiful life here," he said. His voice made to paste over any crack of doubt. "She has a community. She has a job that supports her. You are trying to tear that down." It was the sort of rhetoric that tends to rally people toward continuity. It colors doubt as disloyalty. There was a fierce logic to it and a softer, sinister edge. Anyone who calls your doubts illegitimate can shepherd you back into a narrative that keeps them safe and you obedient. Then, something happened that surprised both of us. A woman from a table near the tent's edge, someone who I had noticed earlier while she talked quietly on the phone, rose and approached us with a small, trembling hand extended. She introduced herself as Rachel. She was not the Rachel in my evidence file, but she was carrying the kind of presence that matters. She had an old scar along her forearm and eyes that had seen too many affairs of silence and denial. "I overheard," she said, voice thin but determined. "I have a friend who had something similar happen. I just thought I wanted to tell you. I think you were brave." The bravery of strangers is its own strange light. It can warm you when your own family turns cold. Emma, meanwhile, was collapsing against a pillar, the weight of all she had tried to hold upright now buckling. I had never wanted to break my daughter the way she feared I could. I wanted to give her facts without crushing her. I wanted to be the kind of mother who could be both honest and forgiving. The tension between those desires pulled me into a place I had not anticipated. I realized the possibility that my revelation could be the thing that saved her, and it could also be the thing that drove her away. Love is cruel in that way. It forces you to choose between your child's safety and your relationship with them. The security guard, a broad-shouldered man with a dry voice, gestured that perhaps we should take this inside for a private conversation. Alex snapped at that. His posture rigid as if he had been trained in the art of deflection. "We cannot have accusations swinging at us at our own wedding," he said. People are more susceptible to shame when their narrative is public. He was good at redirecting the chorus. He turned to the small knot of guests and said matter-of-factly, "Let's not let this get out of hand. This is a celebration." That call for calm was effective for some. For others it felt like an attempt to sweep a wound under a tent. Hours later, after the immediate wave had passed and most guests had been shepherded back into a semblance of normalcy, Emma found me sitting on the steps outside the tent. Her face was wet with the kind of tired that comes from crying until the body gives in. She sat down beside me, and for a moment there was silence thick enough to drink. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for making my life public like that," she said, voice small. "But there is something in me that won't let me marry if I'm ignoring something important. I need time. I need to look at what you brought me. I need to know for myself." This was not reconciliation. This was not absolution. It was, in the small, brittle way that actually matters, the beginning of a process. She was not angry with the truth itself. She was angry with how it arrived. We did not share a holy moment. We shared, instead, a parent and child conversation where both parties carried the weight of their histories. I told her again about Mark and how people who carry the guilt of absence sometimes get loud about the things that might cause pain to those they love. She listened. She asked me questions with the clinical precision of someone trying to gather evidence to make a life-altering decision. The tone was not cinematic. It was grim and tender and incredibly human. When the wedding was postponed that evening, it didn't feel like a triumph. Felt like a necessary pause. Some guests left immediately, the kind who avoid the smell of moral complexity. Others sat with a stunned quiet, picking at pastries that tasted like betrayal. There were sharp looks exchanged across linen-covered tables. Conversations spun into the evening air like thin threads, some of them weaving new alliances, others unraveling old ones. The club manager approached me later and, with that familiar bureaucratic poetry, said they would be filing an incident report and that he would ask both families to meet with him. Privately, he stressed. He nodded. Civilities changed hands like condolences. That night, I drove home alone under a sky washed with stars that looked sharper because my eyes had been trained to notice fractures. My hands held the steering wheel like someone gripping the rail of a ship that had just weathered a storm. The house smelled like the sourdough I hadn't baked, like the laundry I had not folded. I sat at my kitchen table, the kettle untouched, and allowed myself to feel profoundly tired. There were no instant fixes. There was only the long, slow work of owning what we'd done and letting the consequences land. If this is resonating, please tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to be the person who risked everything to tell a hard truth? I'm reading, and it matters to me to know I'm not alone in this exact kind of heartbreak.